Going into section 7 now of chapter 7, factoring trinomials. Now this is the standard form of a quadratic expression, a typical trinomial. Now what we're going to do here, as our objectives indicate, is to see when the leading coefficient of this quadratic expression is a 1, what techniques do we use to factor this trinomial into its binomial factors? So there is a protocol, and the slides here go through it, but I'd like to give it my shot as well. So it's in standard form. There are no common factors that we could factor out. So my strong suggestion is you put two sets of parentheses underneath, like so. Now eventually, hopefully, you'll put in there the binomials that when FOIL gave you this. So you're going to undo the FOIL. So the first, you recall, gave us this term. So that's pretty easy. When there's just a 1 here, this is going to be an x and an x. Now our last term is a 12, that we multiplied this by this to get the 12. But then when we did our outers and inners, it had to add up to an 8. So the theory behind it is we start listing factors of 12. 1 times 12, 2 times 6, and that's as far as we have to go, because if we add now the factors of 2 and 6, we get our 8, which is our middle term. So this would be a 6, this would be a 2, and now we think, what are our signs? Well, since these are all plus, these are going to be all plus as well. And that's our first one. When we FOIL it, it checks out. Now they go through, again, what we did a little bit. You're looking for factors that would add up to 8. Okay, now let's check this one out. So again, we want to have two parentheses. And we're looking, it's in standard form. So what will be our first that will give us y squared? Well, y times y. Now as we look at the 20, we go 1 and 20. 1 times 20. 2 times 10. Now as we look at these, notice we have an 8. And that's negative, and this is negative. So if we subtract, if this is a negative 10 and this is a positive 2, if we add these together, we get a negative 8. So this is the artistic part of doing this. So let's try a 10 and a 2. And again, we'll put a negative by the 10, a positive by the 2. And when we do our outers, we get a negative 10y, inners, positive 2y, the difference is a negative 8y. So this checks out. And again, mentally we run through the factors where we try to figure out what we're going to do. And there they are, right there. Now, as we do this, we sometimes wonder, what will our middle signs be? So for instance, down here, these are pretty much the same, except this one's a positive, and this one's a negative. Now your n term is positive, And if we FOIL this, we get this. And if we FOIL this, we get this. Keeping in mind our outers here are -1, inners a -4, add up to a -5. So it takes a little experience in figuring out what your signs could be. All right, let's try this one. Now, as we look at this one, we see there is a common factor in each one of a 5x. So here we get then a x squared minus 3x plus 2. And we can check it again to be sure we've done it right. So now that we have a trinomial with the greatest factor taken out, we're going to use 2 parentheses. And this one's relatively easy, an x and an x. Again, if x is 1, that's the only possibilities you could have. And factors of 2 is prime, so a 2 and a 1. Our 2 is positive, so both of these signs must be the same as we do our last term. So if this is negative and this is negative, we FOIL it, we get this. It checks out. And you'll have plenty of practice. And then we factor this, and there's our answer. Now, of course, you can reverse it by foiling and then multiplying through by the 5, and you get your original check. Okay, let's try this one. Again, it's in standard form, but we see there are common factors of 10, and then y to the third. So this then becomes y squared minus 2y minus 8. So we're looking, once we set it up for our next row, 2 sets of parentheses, y, y, and 4 and 2, because we're looking for a difference of 2. Now our middle term here is negative, so the outers would need to be a -4, inners a positive 2, so that when we do the FOIL, we get a -2y here, and when we do our last, we get a -8. So a little bit of art, but these aren't too difficult yet. They give a lot of background. So, when factoring polynomials, always look for a common monomial factor first. Then put it in standard form. Now, every once in a while, you're going to end up with something like this that does not have binomial factors. Let's check this one out here. So we have x squared plus 3x plus 4. And you try it. Now we know this is going to be an x and an x. And factors of 4 are 4 and a 1 and a 2 and a 2. So this would add up to 5. And this would add up to 4. So there's no way to get these factors with these signs to be factorable. When we see this, we say it is prime. That is, it's not factorable with integer coefficients. Okay, this was relatively short, so let's do a few of these. And let's check them out. I'll do them with you, actually. So for this one, and I'll put it up here where we have a little bit of room. So again, the a factor of these, or the a term, is a 1. So this is just going to be an x and an x. And we're looking for factors of 28 that have a difference of 3. Well, let's list them here. It's 1 times 28, 2 times 14, 4 times 7. Yeah, that's why it wasn't making sense. So this is a 7 and a 4. So this is going to be a negative, and this will be a positive. All right, let's check this one out here. Y. This one's easy. A 7 and a 5. That's 35. And if they're both negative, it adds up to a negative 12y as a middle term. And this one, x, 3, 1. And this one's an easy one too. And it checks out. And this one, a, 1 and 1. This one's going to be prime, because there's no way we're going to get a negative 1 out of there. Now, for this next one, we need to take out a 2y from each one. So this will give us y squared plus 12y plus 32. Take a 2 out of there and a 2 out of there. So we get 2y, 2 sets of parentheses, y, and that looks like 8 and a 4. And some of these are easy, and as long as you remember your multiplication tables a little bit, and this checks out. Now here we're going to take a 4 out of everything, 4a squared. And this will give us a to the 4th. How about a to the 2nd here? This is going to be 12a. And we're going to take a 4 out of here and get 2. And we got 8, 48. 4 goes into 48. And we're left with a 28, so 7. There you go. All right, now we're going to factor this. And again, when our first term is a 1 here, it's easy. Next section, they're going to get a little more challenging. And then we have 27 here. So we're looking factors of 27. And I believe it's a 9 and a 3. Yeah, 3 times 9 is 27. And if we add them together, we get this. So it's just number 4 was the one we couldn't factor. All right. And we'll take a look. Okay, good. All right, 15 minutes.